Hey, what's up guys? This video is for section 1.7, which is called functions, and this is the second part. So just a review from the first part. First part, I show you guys how to check if a relation is a function by using the vertical line test or checking equations. But today, in this video, I'm going to show you guys how to evaluate a function when you guys have function notation. So the first thing is to check to understand what is function notation. So function notation looks like this. You guys have an f with the parentheses x equals, and then you guys have kind of like an equation 3x minus 8. We say function notation because this letter here means there's a function for our relation. When you guys have a function, we can start building more and more points of the function, and that's how we're going to get a graph, and that's where we have to evaluate for the function. Now, what does it mean, f and we have parentheses x? First of all, this right here is read as the function of x, or you can also say f of x for short. So you guys see those two different ways you guys can read this notation. You can say it's function of x or f of x. This is the short version. F of x is very common. So we have a letter f and x. Now this letter here, f, is the name of the function. Every function has a different name. So you guys will have f of x, or maybe a g. You guys can have the letter g of x or h of x or a of x. So there's a lot of names of functions, but the most common in Algebra 1 that we have are f of x. You might have a g instead of an f, g of x or h of x. Now this function here, it's equal to 3x minus 8. Now this part of the function is called the rule of the function, which means this is going to help us find the values that we want to evaluate. When we want to find the y value, we are going to input an x. So that's why you have an x here. So you're going to substitute, you're going to input an x, and we're going to get an output. And I'll explain that more in a second. But that rule is what helps us find those values. We are going to start making tables. We are going to start making order pairs, and we're going to graph to make an actual function. You guys will use the function. Just keep in mind, guys, f of x here is f of x or function of x. So a couple ways you guys can actually read that notation. Now something else that you also have to understand. This f of x is the same thing as the letter y. So in a function, you can actually substitute or replace that f of x as y. So another way you guys can write this function is y equals 3x minus 8. So it's very important that you guys understand that y is the same thing as f of x. So I'm just going to write it down on the bottom so you guys can remember that f of x is the same thing as y, or we can say that y is the same thing as f of x. So this is what is called function notation. You guys have the name of a function. So the name of the function will be here, f of x, g of x, or h of x. And we are going to have a rule of that function to help us evaluate for the y value, which is the output of your functions. Now, how does an actual function work? Well, here you guys can see that I do have a function rule, that the one I show you guys, the equation that describes the function. So you guys see the definition up here, f of x equals 3x minus 8, or you can say y equals 3x minus 8. So a function works like a machine. When you guys have a machine, just like the picture here, this machine is the function, and you are going to input, you're going to put in a number, and the machine is going to work, it's going to do its thing, and it's going to give you guys an output. So this function here is going to be inside of the machine. So let me write that down for you guys. So notice that I do have the function here, y equals 3x minus 8, and that function, guys, can change every time. That machine can change every time. You guys can have a minus 2x plus 10. You guys can have 5x squared minus 20. So this rule is going to change every time you have a different function. But you guys are going to input, you're going to put in a number here. that number is going to go into the X, and then the machine is going to work and you're going to get an output. So that's how the machine works. You put in a number, it's going to do its thing, it's going to work, and then it's going to give you guys an output, which is a different number. So you're going to plug in a number into the X and you're going to get the Y out. Put in the X and you get the Y out. You have your input and you get your output. So that's how you actually make tables in a function. When you guys want to make a t-table, notice here we don't have any numbers for this table, but I know that my inputs are my domain values and my outputs are my range values. In other words, these are your X values and these are your Y values. So I'm going to put those values here, X and Y. So when you guys make a table, you can actually choose the X values that you want to input, and then you just want to find out what are the Y values. Now, more likely, in your math class, your teacher is going to give you guys a table with the X values already. Usually that's what we do in a math class. But if you guys do not have numbers for X's, you guys can choose any numbers you want. But I'll tell you guys the ones that are easier to use, the most common to use in a table. So you guys should use negatives and positive numbers when you guys construct a table. And that's what we're going to do right now. We are going to construct a table. And I'm going to choose numbers that are negative, positives, and 0. We want to know what happens to the function when x equals 0. That's why we include the 0 in there. So I'm going to put a -2, a 0, and a +2. And usually that's what we do. We have negative numbers, the 0, and positive numbers. You guys can choose more numbers. If you make a bigger table, you guys can have a -2, -1, and then the 0 here, and then +1, +2. So you make a bigger table for the x values. You guys can start with the -3, -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, and 3. So you guys can make your table as big as you want, but usually 4 points, 3 points, even 5 points is best when you guys construct a table, because it's going to give you guys a better idea when you have more points. But the idea here is to show you how to get the output. So now I do have the input, the domain. To get the output, I'm going to take the number, this first domain, which is the input, and I'm going to put it into the machine, into the X. So I'm going to plug it in, and that machine is going to give me a Y value out, the output. So I put the input, and I'm going to get the output. How do you do that? Well, you substitute. You guys are just going to have Y equals, and imagine that's the machine right here on the right side of the table. I'm going to have the 3 times, and I'm going to substitute the -2 there, and we have -8. You guys do the math, follow the order operation. Remember, PEMDAS, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. So we have to substitute first, and then we multiply here, multiplication, then we have a minus. So 3 times -2, that's -6. And -6 minus 8, that is -14. So I'm going to put a -14 right here. So that's my first output. I have an input of -2. So notice I put it in the machine into the X, and I got a -14 out. The next step, now you guys take the next number. 0 is your new input, so you put it in, and then you want to know what is your output. So you do the work here, you substitute. Y equals 3 times 0 minus 8. You do the math, and that's going to be -8. So what it means, you substitute, you input a 0, and you get out a -8. You input a 0 into the X, and you get out a Y for -8. And the next one, same thing. You substitute into the function, into the X, and you want to know what is the Y. So Y equals 3 times 2 minus 8. And the answer is -2. You guys multiply 3 times 2, that's 6. 6 minus 8, that is -2. So you guys construct a table. That's what we do. You guys input a number into the X, and we need to find out the output. Input is your X, so you guys have the X values. All you have to look for are the Y values. And no matter what number you guys choose for X's, those are the numbers you're going to input, you're going to substitute. So what we're saying is, if you guys have a domain or input of -2, we have a range of -14 or an output. If the domain is 0, the range is -8. If the input is 2, the output is -2. And you guys can construct more and more points here, but it depends what your teacher wants. And like I said, sometimes, usually, your teacher will give you guys a table with the x values already set, so you guys can use those numbers to construct the table. So now what I want to do is actually to evaluate a function for a specific input. So you guys have to understand what the problem means here. If you read the problem, it says if f of x, so that's a function, f of x equals -4x plus 7, and g of x, this is a second function. It has a different name. G of x equals x squared minus 5. We want to find each value. We want to evaluate when f is 2, f of 2, and we want to evaluate g of -3. Now, a couple things you guys have to notice here. One, we don't have an x anymore here. We do have a number, 2. Same thing over here. There's no x. We have a -3. So those are the numbers you are going to input. So we have an input of 2, which is your x value, and your input over here is -3. The second thing you have to also be careful is the function you want to use to input your number. So this input, you must substitute into the f function or function f. Over here, we want to use the function g. So we need to input or substitute this number into this function. So this is what I do. I always first look what the function is. So I'm just going to zoom in here to show you guys better those functions. I'm going to rewrite what the function that I want. So I start with the input. So I put f of 2 equals, so that's the first thing I do. And I go and look for the function f. So I have function of f right here. So f of x. And I copy the rule of the function. So this rule is going to go right here. So notice I just brought down the rule, -4x plus 7, -4x plus 7 into the function. Now this input, you guys are going to substitute into every x that you see in the rule of the function. Now there's only one x here, okay? But sometimes you guys can have 2 different x's or maybe 3 different x's in the rule. So you guys need to substitute this number, that input, into the x, into every x, into the function, the rule of the function. So I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to substitute the 2. I'm just going to have the arrow 2 go into the x. So now you guys see that the 2 is in the function. So there's the 2. -4 times 2 plus 7. This you have to evaluate. You just follow the order of operation and you guys find what is the answer. So you guys see that when you guys evaluate, you multiply first. -4 times 2 is -8, bring down the 7, and we get a -1, -8 plus 7. Now what this means, guys, if you input a 2 into the function, so notice I have a 2 here, I'm going to get a -1. When my input is 2, I'm going to put here input is 2, my output is -1. Output here. When my domain is 2, my range is -1. So let me write that down so you guys understand the vocabulary that you guys need to learn. So when my domain is 2, my range is -1. Now another way you guys can actually write down the answer is in order pair. This right here is the answer. When you guys evaluate f of 2, so you plug in a 2 into the x, the answer is -1. So that's my answer. But as an order pair, you guys can have your 2 values. X goes first, so we have the 2. So my input is 2. My output, or the y, is -1. It's not very common to have this answer in order pair, but that's what it is. When you guys input a number, you guys get an output. In your math class, just ask your teacher what answer they want. This is sufficient for me. You guys have a -1 for the answer. But if I ask you guys, what's the order pair? Just be prepared. You guys just say when the input is 2, the output is -1. So let's try the next one here. The next one is g of -3. So first, I need to know what function I need to use. So I am going to write this down first. So I have what I want, g of -3, and I'm going to look for the function of g. Now the function of g is right here. G of x equals x squared minus 5. So I am going to put this function right here, and you guys will have x squared plus 5. So notice this one, x squared plus 5 goes right here, x squared plus 5. I'm going to take my input, which is -3. That's going to be your x value. And I'm going to substitute into the x. Now remember, if you guys have multiple x's over here, you guys have to substitute that number into every x in the function. Right now, we just have an x with a square. So now I am going to substitute the input, which is -3, into the function. So I'm going to have parentheses here. I have the -3 inside the parentheses with the squared and the -5 over here. Now you guys have to be careful here because we have to evaluate this function. So order operation, parentheses, exponents, and then multiplication or division. Inside of the parentheses, we cannot do anything, but we do have a squared here. So I'm going to have to square that number. -3 squared. Remember that when you guys have a negative inside of the parentheses and the exponent is even, the answer has to be positive. So we get 9 minus 5, and that's going to equal 4. So notice this is a positive 9 because the negative is inside the parentheses and the exponent is even. So it's going to be positive 9. Bring down the -5, and we get a 4. So one more time, what this means is when you guys have an input of -3, you guys have an output of 4. So I'm going to write that down. When the input is 3, or you guys can say domain, the output is 4, or you guys can say the range. When the domain is -3, the range is 4. When the input is -3, the output is 4. So that's the answer right there, 4. But once again, you guys can write it as an order pair. And this is just going extra to show you guys what else we can do with those numbers. But my order pair can be -3 for my input, and my output is +4. So that's how I know what the values are. When my input is -3, my output is 4. Can you guys grab that point? Of course. You guys have an x coordinate, a y coordinate, 3 to the left, 4 up, and you guys can graph this point here. But this is how you evaluate functions. You guys substitute the numbers into the correct function, and then you guys evaluate to find the output. And that's the main idea. You input, and you want to get an output. Now this one is a little bit more. You guys do have different functions, f of x and g of x again. Now the functions are different in this example. Let's just understand what they are. F of x is -x plus 10, and g of x is x squared plus x. So notice this function has two x's, an x squared plus an x. Now we want to evaluate, we want to find the value of g of -2 plus 1. So what that means, guys, you guys have an input of -2 and you're going to evaluate, but you are adding a 1 to that function. So that's separate. You guys have that at the end of the function. Over here, it's a little bit weird because you guys do have f of m plus 4. So first, let's understand what this is. When you guys look at your input, I'm looking at my function here, g of -2 plus 1. I'm going to have to use the function of g, which is right here. G of x equals x squared plus x. So I'm going to input the number inside of the parentheses. This is my x value or my input. So first, I'm just going to write down the function of g first, and that's going to be x squared plus x. So notice what I did. I just took the function of g and I wrote it down, but I do have a plus 1 at the end. So this plus 1 comes down here. Now this number, I'm going to substitute input into every x of the function. So -2 goes into the x, -2 goes into the x. So when you guys substitute, we have negative 2 squared. Notice the negatives inside the parentheses with the square, plus a negative 2 plus 1. Now this one, you have to follow the order of operation. So we do the exponents first. So negative 2 squared, that's going to be positive 4. When I multiply positive times negative here, we have a positive times a negative. That's going to be a negative 2. And I bring down the plus 1 at the end. So notice that what happens with the plus 1 at the end. You guys are just bringing down the plus 1 at the end. Plus 1, plus 1. Now you guys are going to finish the problem. And 4 minus 2 is 2 plus 1 is 3. So the answer for this problem is 3. Now I'm not going to put it in order pair because this here is actually doing something else. You guys are taking the function and you're adding a 1 here. It's just not inputting the negative 2 into the function. You're adding a number. So this doesn't really work with order pairs. But the answer is positive 3 when you guys have g of negative 2, which is the input negative 2 plus 1. Now the one over here, you guys have to make sense of the problem. Because inside of the parentheses, we do have a variable m, but this is your input. So that's going to be the x for the function. Do not get confused with the m. I'm just going to put a box right here and tell you guys this is your x. All of this here is your x value in the function. We're not adding a number at the end, so I'm not going to worry about plus 1 or minus 5, whatever number you might have, but we don't have anything. So I'm just going to write down the function of f first. So function of f of x is right here. So this is the function I need. So I'm going to have a negative x plus 10. Now I'm going to substitute input this into the x. All of that is your x. It's weird. I know it's weird because we have an m and I'm telling you guys that's your x, but all of that is your input. So you're going to input into the x. I'm going to bring down the negative. Here's the parentheses. I'm going to bring down the 10 right here. And I'm going to substitute m plus 4. So one more time. You guys have your input m plus 4 into the x. So this becomes m plus 4. There's the negative. There's the plus 10. Now you guys evaluate. You guys distribute the negative and combine like terms. So when you guys distribute the negative into the parentheses, we get negative m minus 4 plus 10. And you guys combine like terms. The minus 4 here and the plus 10 are like terms. Those are constants. So that simplifies to positive 6. So my answer is negative m plus 6. And this example is kind of like an application problem. You just need to know how to use the functions to evaluate different values. But it says here that Martin earns $8.50 per hour proofreading ads at a local newspaper. His weekly wage, W, can be described by the equation W equals 8.5H. So first we need to understand what they are saying. So his weekly wage is represented by W. So that means how much they get paid or he gets paid a week. So that's his check. So W is a week. In the equation, W equals 8.5 times H gives you the amount he's going to get paid at the end of the week. Now they also tell you where H is the number of hours worked. So if he works 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 20 hours a week, you guys substitute the number into the H, and that's going to give you guys the actual amount he's going to get paid. Now, option A, it says here that you want to write the equation in function notation. All you do, guys, all you have to do is you're going to bring down your W here equals 8.5. So that's your regular equation. Now you guys are going to change that W into function notation. So we're going to use an F. And remember that we need a variable inside of the parentheses. So let me show you guys what I mean. So I have F of something. And I'm not going to use X here because if you notice, I'm multiplying this amount, 8.5 times hours, H. So your H will be your input, the number of hours that person, Martin, is going to work per week. So I'm going to put an H right here. So f of h equals 8.5 times h. This is your function notation for his weekly wage. F of h equals 8.5h. Notice that the variables are the same here, and it has to be like that. When you guys have a function, whatever variable you have here, it has to be the same as this one over here, because that's how you know where to substitute. So x, or h, or m, whatever variables you guys need to use. Now that's part A. Part B says you guys want to find f of 15. So guess what? 15 is h. So that's going to be your number of hours that this person worked. So h will be 15. All you do, guys, you are going to have f of 15 equals 8.5 times h, which means you are going to substitute 15 into the h. So that's going to be 8.5 times 15. And when you guys multiply those two numbers, the answer is 127.5. Now, since we are talking about money, we don't say 127.5, we say 127.50. That 50 means 50 cents. So Martin is going to get paid $127 with 50 cents at the end of the week. Now this is when he works for 15 hours. That's the number we substitute. If he works less hours, let's say 8 hours, this is going to change to 8. So you multiply 8.5 times 8. He might work more hours, 20 hours. So you multiply 8.5 times 20, and that's going to give you guys a new amount. Alright guys, so this concludes my video for evaluating functions. Make sure you guys practice. If you like my videos, you guys can click that like button, or you guys can also subscribe to my channel. And I'll see you guys later.